Labor MP Ed Husic. Ed Husic, thanks so much for your time. When you look at the temporary exclusion orders, Labor has he's going to let them through the Senate. He's not going to block them. So fundamentally, you believe this is the right course of action in terms of putting this mechanism in place?
Of course. I mean, it's been long overdue. The UK brought this type of regime in 2015. So why did we have to wait so long for it to actually be brought here to deal with a serious issue? My objections are, how did it happen that we had so many people leave after the government bragged, the coalition bragged, that they were stopping people from leaving the country to go into war zones and act in this way? How is it that it took so long for them to then bring in a regime that other governments realised in terms of foreign fighters needed to be brought in? And why is that the case? And why isn't it that they've followed the bipartisan recommendations of the committee to make sure that the laws align in many respects to what other governments have worked out works? So, I just think this is another case where it's been sloppy. There's been sloppy, ineffectual work by Peter Dutton as the Home Affairs Minister. I think more questions need to be raised about the way he manages this portfolio. He spent more time last year counting numbers than doing work in a vital portfolio. And I think this is a serious issue that we should pursue.
But a committee's recommendations are just that, they're just recommendations. Why is this such an issue to not take all of them on board when the Minister says he has considered them and considers that at least it's only 2 of them that haven't been completely adopted?
Because the committee, basically drops the politics, drops the politicking, thinks deeply about the advice it's given, not just from the security agencies, but from others who've got a considered opinion in the community, Law Council and others, and then frames its recommendations with a lot of consideration attached to them. And if they say, as a result of their considerations, it would be better to strengthen the law in this way, I think the government should be made to work double time to explain why those recommendations aren't good enough to follow. And so, as I said, I just think, Peter Dutton has got a lot to answer for as to, why so many people left, why he hasn't brought the regime in the way that he should, why has he taken so long. And I think the other thing is the government just can't be trusted on national security. They prioritise politics over the safety of the country. And in Peter Dutton's case, you've got to ask, if his colleagues could not bring themselves to put him in a leadership position and couldn't trust himself in a leadership position, why is he being trusted with national security when so many things are going off the rails under his watch?
Is there a concern within Labor, though, and I know you spoke about this yesterday with Tom Connell, but in relation within Labor, obviously national security, there's a concern that the opposition is perceived as not as strong as the government, and that some of your colleagues would like to just, not have a fight in this space. Is that an issue that you need to manage?
Well, I don't think we should shy away from standing up and making the arguments about what we think needs to be done to make Australians safer. And I think...
But there's not a lot of difference, is there? It's not a massive...
Well, look, I would make the point that I think Christina Keneally has zeroed in on this issue of competence of Peter Dutton and has been making the case that the buck stops with him in terms of some of the decisions that he has either made or failed to make in this area. There are other laws that are coming up for consideration in Parliament about detention orders that have sat here since September 11, that the security agencies have been saying we need to replace the regime and reform it, and Peter Dutton hasn't done it. And the question has to be why? And he's had it for months, probably years, to fix them, and he hasn't done it. And Christina Keneally has been focusing rightly on why isn't Peter Dutton doing his job in terms of protecting the country and making sure our laws are fit for purpose in that regard.
One of the concerns we've heard from a number of experts today has been about whether this protection about having a judicial review actually goes to the heart of the application, or whether it's just a mechanism that they can use to decide whether it was unlawful or lawful. It doesn't actually assess the merits of the original application. Is that something Labor's going to be prosecuting?
Look, I think that's a question best directed to Christina as the Shadow Home Affairs Minister. My view is, I think, and this is just one view I will put out there, I think increasingly we need to probably have a specialist panel of judges that deals with the matters that get triggered by these laws over time. That gets rotated through the existing system so that you don't have people just locked in the one way. They keep They're across, they bring fresh eyes, they're across the laws, they can make the calls as required. Retired judges are useful to some extent, but they don't have the same weight as someone who's actively appointed and has to consider these things on an ongoing basis. And I think there is, given the complexity and the evolving nature of this threat, the threats that we have to deal with and the need to make sure that we're safe and secure, that we do have those judges in place and that the government just doesn't go as a sop to us, oh, well, we'll just bring in a retired judge whenever to oversee some of these decisions. We should have someone with capability on an ongoing basis. But again, this is just one view I put in the public space.
And in terms of some other matters going to Parliament today, the Ensuring Integrity Bill, which is basically targeting unions, and it's relating to, I guess, prompted by one particular union figure. But is this something that Labor needs to start to grapple with? Because obviously there's not a lot of sympathy in the electorate for militant unionists, particularly ones facing court. Why not compromise with the government on this particular bill?
If you don't mind, I don't want to engage directly with your question. I want to come at this from another way. Politicking on tax, politicking on national security, politicking on drought, now politicking on workplace relations. That's all this government's got. So this integrity bill is not about, on its merits, dealing with this issue. This is a belief in the coalition that they have some perceived political advantage that they can pursue, and so they put a bill up to do it. And what we've seen this week, as I said, or in the sittings that we've had so far in just the first month of this parliament, has been politicking by the government on a range of issues. So I'm not going to get, if you don't mind, Kieran, too worked up about going into the merits of this. This is not designed for merits, this is designed for politics, I would say.
And it'd be remiss if we didn't mention Kieran Gilbert's column from yesterday for 2600 about your future leadership potential. Do you see yourself as a future Labor leader?
I was very grateful that Kieran reached for the brush and pointed red concentric circles on my chest. So I'll just, thanks for that. I'm good.
But Peter Costello said that every MP has a leadership baton in their knapsack. You'd have one, wouldn't you?
Well, look, let me put it to you this way. And I've thought a lot about this in terms of my time in Parliament, the number of years that I've racked up. You've got to come here with a view that you want to make a difference and have an impact. If you're not, you're just collecting a paycheck. What's the point of being here? So, leadership should be exercised not just in the traditional ways of people standing up and taking a position, but we should argue the case. I think the public. You respect the public more by having the arguments out there, putting your side forward and trying to convince them. And what reinforced that in me more than anything else was thinking about in terms of Bob Hawke and the way that he approached politics and in terms of the condolence motions that were carried. That was the big way that the politics should be done.
Ed Husic, we appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks for the circles.
Thank you.